Is there a fleshly appeal to theological disagreements? There definitely is. And I know that because I've experienced it and I wanted to tell you about it. Now, there's probably a lot of different angles to this, but there is this allure of superiority. That's number one. And number two, there is the allure of belonging. And those two, I think, drive the incentive for a lot of disagreements. And that's just outside of theology. Okay, so let's just think about it outside of theology. Those two aspects might include things like competitive sports and the team that you support. There's a sense of belonging in the other supporters of a particular team. And then there's also a sense of superiority when you can convince yourself that your team is the best or the winner. Now, in competitive sports, your team can be proven to be not the winner. But then step into the realm of theology. The thing about theology is that everybody feels like they're right. So it's a competitive sport where everybody gets to feel that sense of superiority and that sense of internal belonging. So I can think of quite a few times where this drove division for me, but I want to tell you about one. There was a situation where we actually were talking about eschatology, and I sent around a question to a number of the theological friends that I have, other pastors and authors and things like that. And there was a particular author who had a particular view, and this was an author who me and my other close friends respected and actually were friends with. We liked him a lot, but he had this one view that was it was a little it didn't sit well with me, and I used that to go to my other another pastor who I really wanted affirmation from. I really wanted to kind of belong to his circle. I wanted to be kind of in the clique or kind of in the approved center of his world. And I used that aspect that other author, who we both respected, that other author thought of, to kind of I took that to him and said, did you know that so-and-so believes blah, 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 blah? And it was a non-essential issue. It wasn't something that mattered all that much. But what it did is it gave us this sort of what I would call like a chagrin conversation, like, oh, I can't believe that he thinks that. Like, we're so much smarter than him. We didn't say that, but that's the sense it gets. Like, we are so much smarter than him. And we're in this circle together over here, and he's out there. And I'm just telling you from my personal experience, I'm not blaming anybody else. I'm analyzing my own experience. In my own experience, looking back at that, that was a fleshly motivation because I felt superior to him, which was a fleshly motivation. And I felt this sense of belonging in this circle of this pastor who I admired and wanted to be affirmed by him. I wanted his approval. I wanted his approval really bad. And so those were fleshly motivations. Now, there's probably other fleshly motivations that I haven't thought of yet. But I'm just kind of trying to sort out how much of these theological disagreements really are flesh-powered, they're flesh-motivated. I can think of a number of them for me. Now, that little situation that I talked about, it happens all the time. It's not unique. It happens all the time. There's all of these little side conversations going on about what some other person believes and how it's unthinkable how it's such a departure from the orthodoxy that we have been in, or there's just so many of those little conversations going on. And I want to challenge you, how much of that stuff that's going on is flesh powered? How much of it is fleshly, has a fleshly motivation? I know for me, quite a bit of it did. Because as soon as I got out of that realm where I was trying to get that approval, I stopped worrying about it. I stopped caring. I stopped acting like it was the end of the world that so and so believes this or that. Now, all of that should be balanced with this other thing, that there are issues that are they are so important. And those issues, obviously, there's going to sometimes be some division over theological issues. There's going to be sometimes debate. But I think one of the ways that we can tell if we have a fleshly motivation is how we operate, actually. So if someone has a belief that I think is unthinkable, a bad operation that indicates probably a bad motivation is if I go and talk to some other person about that, and we talk about how wrong that person is, and I do that without having talked directly to the person who holds that view. Now, what I've heard people say over and over is, well, I don't need to talk to them. They've published that, or they've printed that. Well, I've had people say that about me, that they think they know what I believe because I said something at some point. That's the danger of recorded information, is our thoughts are dynamic. We're also imprecise. And so I may have thought something at some point that I don't now, but also I may have said it poorly, or who knows. Fact is, a lot of times those back channel side conversations that exclude talking to the source, that exclude talking to the person who holds that belief, when you have the capability to do so, like when it's a friend or when it's an acquaintance and you have the ability, you have the contact to talk to them, and you choose not to, I would question your motives in that. I would say that you ought to question your motives. Is what I mean. I'm not going to be questioning your motives. I don't care. But you ought to question your motives if that's your operating method. If you are able to talk to that person about that, and you refuse to do that, but you talk to other people, I would question that. That sounds like a fleshly motivation to me. That sounds like that's driven by a fleshly motivation. Now, there are those. So I've been saying that part for a while. That's not new, but there's another thing that I've thought of. There's another type of personality that will go directly to that person and they'll just steamroll them. And it gives the sense of feeling superior. So if your operating method is to go directly to the person, I would say, well, that's good if you then can interact with that person with compassion. If you can interact with that person in a way that by the end of the conversation, things are better than they were when you started. But if at the end of direct conversations, things are worse than when they started and you don't have a plan for another conversation, then most of the time that qualifies as a failure. So a win is that you keep talking until the emotions are past so that you can get at what the real issue is. If at the end of the conversation, I'm going to say it again, if the end of the conversation things are worse, not better, and you don't plan to continue the conversation, then you failed. And that's a potential area where there's fleshly motivation. Now, it's possible, all of these situations are dynamic. Of course, it's possible that the other person is just a brute and they're unmanageable. But most of the time, your acquaintances, the people that you've known for a long time, that's not the case. You've already had some kind of, if you have their contact, if they're a friend or somebody that you've spent time with, and you've had times that were good and now they're not good, then that begs the question, why has it changed? And I think it's probably because in a lot of those situations, a fleshly motivation is present, and maybe always was present, or I mean, I don't know. I don't know how to parse that, but here's what I'm saying: theological differences often, not always, often have fleshly motivations. Now, what I don't mean is that the actual difference has a, um, a fleshly motivation. It's very possible to just have a difference of opinion, and we don't necessarily control what our opinions are. We look at the information and we determine what we think is right and wrong. Right. So that's the case. But I guess what I'm getting at is that maybe it could be said this way: theological differences can be weaponized, and I feel like that often happens. It gets weaponized for fleshly motivations, and I've seen it many times. I've done I've done some things interpersonally with people that I'm not proud of, and I did them in a lot of ways so that I could take that story of what I did back to the person, the pastor or the Bible teacher, the author, whatever, that I wanted to get approval from. I would do something out here knowing that I'll be able to tell that person who I'm trying to get approval from, that pastor or minister or whatever, to tell them what I did. And so that's an approval seeking. It's a fleshly motivated thing. And here's the thing: it feels good. When me and that pastor I was talking about were kind of bad mouthing, theologically bad mouthing that other author who thought something. And by the way, that other author was actually a good friend of both of ours. So that's another reason why I feel embarrassed about it. But when we were bad mouthing that guy, it felt good. It was fleshly feel good, but it felt good. I was happy to know that I was in the circle of in getting the approval of that particular pastor, and that we were superior in this. And so it feels good. I understand why it happens, and it's happened to me. It's happened to me quite a bit, actually. I really got wrapped up in it for quite some time. So friends that I had before, kind of, I'll call it a very theological phase in my life. I had a pretty, very theological phase. And the friends that I had before that phase, from years and years before, I went to some of them in the last few years to just kind of apologize and say, look, I don't remember everything that I said or did to you, but I had kind of a phase where I was getting really focused on some particular theological ideas, and those ideas drove me to kind of abandon some of the interpersonal compassion that I have. And so I just apologized to some of those friends, and some of them were honest enough to tell me, yeah, we were, I can't remember the word they used. I don't think they said hurt, but just like we noticed something had changed, you know. And what had changed is I'd found I'd found a fleshly motivation. I'd found something that felt good, that gave me gratification, but it wasn't godly gratification. There was probably some godly gratification in that era, in that phase of my life, but a lot of it was actually fleshly motivations that I got approval. And by the way, I also got approval from the entire circle of people that we kind of all operate that way. And I'm still in that circle. Then to some extent, some parts of that circle have kicked me out, I guess, but I'm still in the circle as far as I'm concerned. But I've identified that a lot of what drove me was the approval of others in that circle, and we would look at people outside the circle and talk about how horribly wrong they are. Now, I do think that some of the people outside the circle are horribly wrong, but I don't think they all are. I think there's lots of people outside of our circle that are okay, that are doing that are doing good ministry. But while we were in, what I heard over and over is that those outside, they're all wrong. All of them are wrong, and we're the ones that are right, and we have to be cautious. You can't mingle with them. If you can't find a church that completely agrees with what we say inside the circle, then don't go to church in your town. Move to a new town or start a church. It's just that kind of stuff. And so that's gratifying. That makes you feel superior. Like I'm superior to everyone in my town because I can't even go to church with them, that kind of thing. So there's a fleshly motivation where that can feel superior. It gives you this sense of feeling superior. And it also gives you a sense of belonging where we all want to have a sense of belonging. We all want to have a sense of superiority, unfortunately. And so theology can offer that if we're not careful. So this is a lot. I know this is probably going to make some people mad if anybody's watching anymore. I don't know, but I'm just this is the insider track. This is just me being honest. I saw that. Now there's others that either won't admit it or they'll be mad at me for saying this, all right? So if you see people being mad at me, you might ask, well, why would they be mad? Maybe it's because I'm saying things that they're experiencing too, but they don't want you to feel that. I mean, they don't want you to hear that. I mean, I don't know, I'm speculating, but like I'm talking about my real experience inside of this thing that we're in, and feels extremely, honest to me to say these things, but I'm sure there'll be those that are mad. There's probably also those that'll say that I'm theologically wrong for saying these things and whatever, and then they'll have conversations about me, and and that's what I'm saying is I think all of that's fleshly motivated, except in cases where it really is a legitimate theological difference. But see, here's the challenge, is that everything that gets kind of gets pulled into these kind of conversations, it's always presented as if this is just, this is so important. We have to castigate this person because what they're teaching now is so wrong, and it's so dangerous and so damaging. And I'm just like, I don't know. What I know is that I was getting ungodly gratification from being involved in that. Now, I don't deny that the theology that we were often talking about was valuable. But alongside that, I mean, you can take something valuable and you can turn it into something that you get fleshly gratification from, fleshly motivations from. So I think that's something that's happened, and I don't really know what to do with it. I guess I'll turn this around and ask you guys, am I the only one that's experienced this? Or have y'all felt this? Those of you that have been kind of on the inside of a circle, whether it be church or certain ministry or whatever, have you experienced this? Because for me, it became troubling at some point. So I'd like to hear from you guys. Am I the only one that's struggling with this issue where I want belonging, I want approval, I want to feel superior? Maybe I'm the only one. That's a possibility. I hadn't thought about that. What if I could be the only one. And if I am, you know what? Then we'll just work on me. Let's just put all of our energies in on me and we'll work on me. But I just think probably not. I'm probably not the only one. So anyway, thanks for watching. It was a little bit rambling, but I think there was something there to think about. So hopefully that's valuable to someone. Thanks.